These aren't just wild stories. These are real, verified conspiracy theories. If this stuff blows your mind like it does mine, show some love with a like and a sub. And hey, which one's the craziest to you? Let's talk in the comments. Project Sunshine. Project Sunshine. Human bodies in nuclear fallout tests. In the 1950s, during the height of Cold War nuclear testing, the U.S. government launched a secret project known as Project Sunshine. Its goal, to study how radioactive fallout, specifically strontium-90 from nuclear detonations, accumulated in human tissue, particularly bones. What makes it truly disturbing is how the government acquired its test subjects. Without informing families, researchers collected body parts from deceased infants and children, often without consent or even notification. The program involved universities, hospitals, and military labs, and ran for years before being publicly acknowledged. In many cases, grieving parents buried their children unaware that key organs had been removed for study. The details of Project Sunshine didn't become widely known until documents were declassified decades later. When exposed, it sparked public outrage and led to investigations into the ethics of medical research and government secrecy. What once sounded like sci-fi horror, a government stealing dead children's remains for radiation experiments, turned out to be chillingly true. Project Sunshine remains one of the darkest and most shocking examples of Cold War-era science violating basic human rights. COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO. From 1956 to 1971, the FBI secretly operated COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, to infiltrate, discredit, and sabotage political organizations it considered subversive. Civil rights groups, anti-war activists, socialist organizations, and even prominent individuals like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were all targets. The FBI used wiretaps, forged documents, harassment, and public smear campaigns to discredit these groups and leaders. One chilling example, they anonymously sent King a letter encouraging him to commit suicide. The program's existence was unknown to the public until 1971, when a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, and leaked secret documents to the press. The exposure led to a Senate investigation and significant reform of U.S. intelligence practices. COINTELPRO was not a conspiracy theory. It was a real government-led operation that violated constitutional rights in the name of national security. It confirmed many long-suspected fears of surveillance and control, proving that even in a democracy, unchecked power can be weaponized against its own citizens. Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods. In 1962, the U.S. Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff proposed a covert operation called Operation Northwoods. The plan aimed to generate public support for military action against Cuba by staging false flag attacks on American citizens and assets, then blaming Fidel Castro's regime. Proposed actions included faking hijackings, sinking refugee boats, orchestrating bombings in U.S. cities, and fabricating a Cuban-backed terror campaign. The document suggested using actors and staged events to sway media coverage and global opinion. Although the plan was endorsed by military brass, President John F. Kennedy flatly rejected it. The operation remained classified for decades until it was declassified in the 1990s. The release stunned the public and confirmed suspicions that the U.S. government had, at one point, seriously considered using deception and violence against its own people to justify war. Operation Northwoods is one of the most concrete examples of a real conspiracy that, had it been carried out, would have changed the course of U.S.-Cuba relations and set a dangerous precedent for government manipulation. The Iran-Contra Affair. The Iran-Contra Affair. In the mid-1980s, the Reagan administration became embroiled in a secret, illegal operation now known as the Iran-Contra Affair. Senior U.S. officials arranged the sale of weapons to Iran, despite an arms embargo, in hopes of securing the release of American hostages held by Hezbollah. The proceeds were then secretly funneled to support the Contra rebels in Nicaragua, despite Congress explicitly banning such aid through the Boland Amendment. When the operation was exposed in 1986, it sparked a major political scandal, Multiple investigations followed, resulting in indictments of 14 high-ranking officials, including National Security Advisor John Poindexter and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Although some were convicted, most had their sentences reduced or were later pardoned. The affair revealed a complex web of backdoor diplomacy, deception, and executive overreach. It confirmed the public's suspicion that the government could and did operate outside legal and ethical boundaries when it served geopolitical interests. Far from theory, the Iran-Contra Affair was a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the manipulation of foreign policy behind closed doors. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was a pivotal event that led to the escalation of the Vietnam War. On August 2, 1964, the U.S. destroyer USS Maddox exchanged fire with North Vietnamese boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. 2 days later, the U.S. reported a second attack, which later turned out to be non-existent. Faulty radar readings and misinterpreted sonar were presented as confirmation of aggression. President Lyndon B. Johnson used this supposed second attack to push the Gulf of Tonkin resolution through Congress, granting him sweeping authority to conduct military operations in Southeast Asia without a formal declaration of war. Years later, declassified NSA documents and testimony from naval officers confirmed that the second incident never happened. This fabricated event gave rise to massive military escalation, leading to the deaths of over 58,000 American soldiers. What was once dismissed as anti-war paranoia, that the government exaggerated or invented the attack, turned out to be true. The Gulf of Tonkin incident remains one of the most powerful examples of how misinformation can be weaponized to justify war. Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird was a covert CIA program allegedly started in the late 1940s, aimed at influencing domestic and international media. The agency reportedly recruited journalists and paid major U.S. news outlets to publish CIA-approved narratives during the Cold War. While long dismissed as a conspiracy theory, declassified documents and statements from former operatives later confirmed that the CIA maintained direct contact with over 400 journalists and had influence over major publications, including the New York Times and Time magazine. The agency used this network to shape public perception, steer political sentiment, and suppress stories that threatened national interests. While it's unclear how long the operation continued or how extensive it was, evidence from the 1976 Church Committee and former CIA officials acknowledged the manipulation of media by intelligence services. Operation Mockingbird shattered the illusion of a fully independent press and raised deep concerns about propaganda, media ethics, and the limits of freedom of information. It proved that influence operations weren't just foreign. They were happening at home, quietly embedded in trusted newsrooms. NSA Mass Surveillance. NSA Mass Surveillance. In 2013, former NSA contractor Edward Snowden leaked thousands of classified documents revealing the vast scope of the U.S. government's mass surveillance programs. Contrary to official claims, the NSA was collecting data on millions of U.S. citizens without warrants, including phone records, emails, internet activity, and metadata from social platforms. The programs operated under secret court rulings from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISC, and involved major tech companies like Google, Apple, and Microsoft, many of which were unaware of the extent of data access. One of the most controversial revelations was PRISM, a system that allowed the NSA to collect private communications directly from tech servers. Snowden's disclosures triggered a global debate on privacy, security, and constitutional rights. The U.S. government initially labeled him a traitor, but later court rulings found the NSA's bulk data collection to be illegal. What was once branded as paranoid speculation, that the government was watching everyone, was undeniably confirmed. Snowden's actions sparked legislative reforms, whistleblower protections, and a new era of digital skepticism. Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove. Hidden deep in the redwood forests of Northern California lies Bohemian Grove, a 2,700-acre private campground owned by the Bohemian Club, an exclusive invitation-only men's group. For decades, every July, some of the most powerful men in the world, U.S. presidents, top corporate executives, bankers, and even artists, have gathered there. While critics long dismissed it as harmless networking, secrecy and bizarre rituals sparked public suspicion. The most infamous tradition is the cremation of care ceremony, in which robed figures burn an effigy beneath a 40-foot stone owl. In 2000, journalist Alex Jones infiltrated the grove and filmed this ritual, confirming what many thought was just urban legend. Documents, leaked guest lists, and testimonies from former members later proved that high-level political and business decisions were informally discussed there, raising concerns about transparency and backdoor policymaking. Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan both attended. While it's not satanic or illegal, Bohemian Grove is real, and so are its secretive gatherings. What once seemed like a crazy conspiracy turned out to be one of the most exclusive and strange networking events on Earth.